The envelope arrived on the worst day of Rachel Morrison's life. Not that she knew it was the worst day yet, that realization would come later. When her husband's lawyer called with the divorce papers and the eviction notice taped itself to her apartment door like a scarlet letter. But the envelope, thin and official, felt like a whisper from a ghost. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Her 7-year-old son, Tyler, watching from the couch where he'd been eating cereal for dinner again. Inside was a single page. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Typed on legal letterhead, "Dear Mrs. Morrison, regarding the estate of Colonel James Hartwell, deceased, you have been named sole beneficiary of property located at 4782 Desert Valley Road, Twentynine Palms, California. Please contact our office to complete transfer." Rachel read it 3 times. Colonel James Hartwell, her father's brother. The uncle she'd met exactly twice in her 32 years, once at her grandmother's funeral when she was 9, and once at her father's burial 6 years ago. Both times, he'd stood apart from everyone, ramrod straight in his dress uniform, eyes scanning the horizon, like he was waiting for an enemy only he could see. Her mother had called him damaged. Her father had called him complicated. Rachel had called him nothing, because he'd disappeared back into the desert both times without saying more than a dozen words to anyone. And now he'd left her something. "Mom?" Tyler's voice pulled her back. "Is that about money?" Rachel looked at her son, too thin, wearing shoes 2 sizes too small, because she couldn't afford new ones yet. His father's eyes staring out from a face that still believed his mother could fix anything. "I don't know, baby. Maybe." The property turned out to be an hour and a half from their cramped studio apartment in San Bernardino. Rachel had called the lawyer, confirmed the details, and learned that property meant a military hangar on 43 acres of nothing. No value estimate, no explanation. Just coordinates and a key that arrived by registered mail 3 days later. "We're going on an adventure," she told Tyler on Saturday morning, packing water bottles and granola bars because she couldn't afford to stop for food. The drive took them through strip malls that became desert, past Joshua trees that looked like they were surrendering to the sky. Tyler pressed his face against the window, fogging the glass with his breath as he traced pictures in the condensation. "Will there be planes?" he asked. "I don't know." "Will we be rich?" Rachel's throat tightened. "Probably not, baby." But even as she said it, a small, desperate hope flickered in her chest. What if? What if this was the miracle she'd been praying for? What if her uncle, the stranger who'd lived like a hermit in the desert, had left her something that could change everything? The road became dirt, then became barely a road at all. Her Honda Civic bounced over ruts that made Tyler laugh, and Rachel wince, every jolt reminding her that the car needed new shocks she couldn't afford. The GPS lost signal, but the lawyer had included hand-drawn directions that turned out to be surprisingly accurate. When the hangar came into view, Rachel's heart sank. It was enormous, that was the first thing. A massive, corrugated metal structure, easily 80 feet wide and maybe 100 feet deep, with doors tall enough to accommodate aircraft. But it was also dying. Rust bloomed across the metal like a disease. Sections of the roof had buckled. The sliding doors hung at awkward angles, half open, revealing darkness inside. Around it, the desert stretched in every direction, broken only by scrub brush and the skeletal remains of what might once have been other buildings. No power lines, no water tower, nothing. "It's big," Tyler said, trying to sound positive. Rachel parked in front of the hangar and sat for a long moment, engine ticking as it cooled, reality settling over her like dust. This wasn't a miracle. This was a problem. A massive, rusty, middle-of-nowhere problem that would cost money to demolish and money to maintain, and money she absolutely did not have. Her phone buzzed. A text from her soon-to-be ex-husband's lawyer. "Final settlement meeting Monday, 2 p.m. Bring documentation of all assets." Assets? Rachel almost laughed. She had a 10-year-old car with a check engine light, $300 in her checking account, and now a collapsing hangar in the desert that was probably full of asbestos and rattlesnakes. "Come on," she told Tyler, grabbing the flashlight from the glove box. "Let's see what Uncle James left us." The key turned smoothly in the padlock, securing the personnel door, a smaller entrance cut into the massive sliding doors. That surprised her. Rachel had expected rust, resistance, abandonment. Instead, the lock clicked open like it had been used recently. The door swung inward on well-oiled hinges. The smell hit first, not decay or abandonment, but gun oil, metal, and something else. Something that reminded Rachel of her father's workshop, of Saturdays spent handing him tools while he fixed their lawnmower or repaired the porch steps. Machine oil and purpose. She clicked on the flashlight. The beam cut through darkness, revealing the cavernous interior. "Whoa," Tyler breathed. The hangar was immaculate. Not abandoned at all, but organized with military precision. The concrete floor was swept clean. Metal shelving units lined the walls, stacked with carefully labeled boxes. Along one wall stood a workbench that would have made any mechanic weep with envy, every tool in its place, outlined in white paint so you could see exactly where it belonged. But it was what occupied the center of the hangar that made Rachel's breath catch. 3 vehicles, covered with heavy-duty tarps, sat in a row like sleeping giants. "Can we look?" Tyler was already moving toward them. "Carefully," Rachel said, following him. The first tarp came off easily, revealing an old Jeep, military style, maybe from the Vietnam era, but in pristine condition, no rust. Fresh tires, keys hanging from the rearview mirror on a hand-labeled tag. "Runs." The second vehicle was a Humvee, also immaculate, also with keys and a note, "Transmission rebuilt 2019. The third was a massive 6-wheel drive transport truck that looked like it could survive an apocalypse. Tyler was running his hands over the Jeep's hood, his face lit up with wonder. Rachel was trying to calculate values. The vehicles alone might be worth, what? 50,000? Maybe more? It wasn't nothing. She moved deeper into the hangar, her flashlight playing across the shelves. Cans of oil, all dated and organized. Boxes of parts, each meticulously labeled. A filing cabinet against the far wall. The cabinet drawers opened smoothly. Inside, Rachel found the first envelope. Her name, in her uncle's handwriting, not Rachel Morrison or Mrs. Morrison, but Rachel Hartwell Morrison, written with the careful precision of someone who understood that names mattered. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm dead and you've made it to the hangar. I wasn't sure you would come. Your father said you were strong, but I know life has a way of breaking strong people. I've been watching from a distance. If you find this story engaging, Please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Not creepy watching, just keeping tabs. I know about Daniel leaving. I know about the money problems. I know you're scared. I'm sorry I couldn't help while I was alive. I had my reasons, most of them probably stupid in hindsight. But I can help now. This hangar is yours, free and clear. 43 acres, no mortgage, no liens. The vehicles are maintained and registered. There's a generator behind the north wall that runs on propane. There are 6 full tanks in the storage shed outside. You have power, but that's not why I left this to you. Rachel, there's something under your feet that's going to change your life. But before you find it, I need you to understand something. This isn't luck. This is compensation for a debt the government never acknowledged and a sacrifice nobody ever thanked me for. In 1971, I was part of a classified logistics operation moving strategic assets out of Southeast Asia. When Saigon fell, our unit was responsible for securing material that couldn't fall into enemy hands. Some of that material is disappeared from the official records. I've spent the last 47 years protecting it, maintaining it, and waiting for the right person to inherit it. That person is you. The floor isn't just a floor. Look for the seam near the north wall. Under the workbench, you'll find a hydraulic access panel. The activation code is your birthday month, day, year, no spaces. What's down there is legally yours under salvage and abandoned property laws. I've spent 3 decades making sure the documentation is airtight. Everything you need is in the filing cabinet. Second drawer, red, folder marked legal. Use it wisely. Use it to build the life you deserve. And when Tyler asks about me someday, tell him his great-uncle wasn't crazy. Tell him I was a soldier who kept faith with a promise nobody else remembered. Love, Uncle James. Rachel read the letter 3 times, her heart hammering. Tyler was still exploring the vehicles, making engine noises as he pretended to drive the Jeep. She moved to the filing cabinet, opened the second drawer. The red folder was there, thick with documents. She pulled it out, hands shaking. Inside, deed to the property in her name, registration papers for the vehicles, and underneath, a manila envelope marked Operation Harvest Moon Final Disposition. Rachel's fingers traced the embossed seal on the documents inside. Department of Defense, Central Intelligence Agency. Declassification, stamps dating from 2003, and page after page of inventory lists, transport manifests, and finally, a single memo dated the 28th of April, 1975. Remaining strategic assets from Operation Harvest Moon, designated as transport losses during evacuation of Saigon. Write-off approved. All remaining field inventory to be considered salvaged by personnel involved in recovery operations. This document constitutes final accounting. The inventory list made Rachel sit down hard on the concrete floor. Gold bars U.S. Mint, 400 troy ounces each quantity, 387. Silver bars, 10 troy ounces each quantity, 2,400. Currency, U.S. $100. Bills, sequential series, 1,969. $2.3 million. Bearer bonds, various denominations, estimated value, $15. million jewelry seized from criminal enterprises, appraised value $8.7 million. At the bottom, in her uncle's handwriting, current estimated value, at market prices, $278 million. Authentication codes in blue notebook on workbench. You'll need them. Rachel couldn't breathe, couldn't think. $278 million under her feet, in a hangar in the middle of nowhere, left to her by a man she'd barely known. Mom, come look at this. Tyler's voice snapped her back. She shoved the papers back in the folder, stood on shaking legs, and joined her son at the workbench. Look! He was pointing at a framed photograph hanging above the tools. It showed a group of soldiers, young men in jungle fatigues, standing in front of a helicopter. One of them was unmistakably her uncle younger, without the grey hair and haunted eyes, but with the same rigid posture. But it was the man standing next to him that made Rachel's breath catch. Her father, decades younger, but definitely her father. One arm around her uncle's shoulders, both of them grinning at the camera with the careless confidence of men who didn't yet know how much war would cost them. A note was tucked into the frame. Jim and David Hartwell, Da Nang, 1,970. Brothers, always. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Her father had never talked about his service, never mentioned serving with Uncle James. She'd always assumed they'd been distant, that her uncle's paranoia and isolation had driven a wedge between them. But this photo told a different story. Her father had known. He'd known about the hangar, about the assets, about everything, and he'd trusted his brother to keep it safe until the right moment. Is that Grandpa? Tyler asked. Yeah, baby. That's Grandpa. He looks happy. He was, Rachel said, her voice cracking, before the world got complicated. She turned back to the workbench, found the blue notebook her uncle had mentioned. Inside were authentication codes, appraisal documents, and contact information for someone named Margaret Chen, identified as expert in authentication and discreet liquidation of recovered assets. Trustworthy. Used her for years. Rachel checked her phone. No signal. Of course not. She looked around the hangar again, seeing it differently now. This wasn't abandonment. This was preparation. Every tool, every vehicle, every carefully labeled box, her uncle had maintained this place like a sacred trust, waiting for her. Tyler, come here. Her son trotted over, still clutching a wrench he'd found. We need to find something under the floor. Together, they moved toward the north wall. The workbench was on wheels. Another surprise. Rachel pushed it aside, revealing clean concrete underneath. At first, she didn't see anything. Then, her eyes adjusted, picking out the faint seam in the concrete, barely visible, running in a rectangle about 6 feet by 4 feet. She knelt, ran her fingers along the edge, found the recessed panel her uncle had mentioned. It looked like a floor drain cover, but when she pried it up, it revealed a keypad. Her birthday. Rachel typed in the numbers. The 14th of August, 1991. Nothing happened. She tried again, her heart sinking. Maybe she'd misunderstood. Maybe a soft hydraulic hiss interrupted her thoughts. The concrete section within the seam began to rise, smooth and silent, revealing itself as a platform mounted on hydraulic pistons. Tyler grabbed her hand, his eyes huge. The platform rose 3 feet, then locked into place with a solid click. Set into the concrete was a vault door, like something from a bank, with a combination lock and a wheel. Rachel stared at it, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. This was real. All of it was real. The combination was in the notebook, another sequence of numbers that her uncle had written in careful block letters. Rachel's hands shook as she turned the dial. Right 23, left 45, right 17, left 9. The lock clicked. The wheel turned smoothly. The door swung open. Inside was darkness, and then her flashlight beam cut through it, and Rachel Morrison saw her future. The vault was about 8 feet deep and 10 feet square, cut into the earth beneath the hangar floor. Every surface was lined with metal shelving, and every shelf was stacked with carefully organized containers. Metal boxes held the gold bars, each one labeled with its weight and purity. Rachel pulled one out, nearly dropped it because it was so much heavier than she'd expected. The bar gleamed in her flashlight beam, stamped with U.S. Mint, 400 ounces, 995 fine. Plastic containers held the silver, stacked in neat rows. Currency was in vacuum-sealed bags, the bills crisp and perfect. The bearer bonds were in fireproof folders. The jewelry was in velvet-lined cases that made Rachel think of pirate treasure, emerald necklaces, diamond rings, gold watches that probably had their own complicated histories. "Is that real gold?" Tyler whispered. Rachel couldn't answer. She was too busy trying not to hyperventilate. $278 million. Under a hangar she'd inherited from an uncle she barely knew. Legally hers, according to documents that looked official and comprehensive and terrifying in their implications. She sat down on the edge of the vault opening, her legs refusing to hold her anymore. Tyler climbed into her lap, surprisingly heavy for 7 years old, and she wrapped her arms around him and just breathed. "Mom, are we rich now?" Rachel thought about the eviction notice taped to their apartment door. She thought about Tyler's 2 small shoes and the check engine light in her car, and the divorce lawyer who kept calling about assets she didn't have. "Yeah, baby," she said, her voice breaking. "I think we might be." They sat there for a long time, mother and son, in the middle of a desert hangar, above a vault full of gold, trying to understand that their lives had just changed in ways they couldn't begin to comprehend. Finally, Rachel stood, setting Tyler carefully aside. She needed to think. She needed to plan. She needed to. Her phone buzzed. She'd moved close enough to the door to catch a signal, and now it lit up with notifications. 17 missed calls, 23 texts, 3 voicemails. The first text was from her landlord. "Your stuff is on the curb. Locks changed. Don't come back." The second was from Daniel's lawyer. "Failure to appear at Monday's meeting will result in default judgment. You will receive nothing." The third was from her best friend Sarah. "Rach, where are you? Daniel's been calling around, says he's going to file for sole custody because you're unstable. Please call me." Rachel stared at the screen, rage and fear warring in her chest. Daniel, who'd cheated on her with his dental hygienist. Daniel, who'd drained their savings to fund his girlfriend's business opportunities. Daniel, who'd left her and Tyler with nothing, and then had the audacity to call her unstable. Daniel, who was going to be very, very surprised when she showed up to Monday's meeting. She pulled up Margaret Chen's contact information from the notebook, saved it to her phone. Then she took photos of the vault, of the gold, of the documents in the filing cabinet. Evidence. Proof. "Tyler, we're going to sleep here tonight," she said. "Here?" He looked around the hangar. which suddenly seemed more like a cathedral than a warehouse. Really? Really? It's ours. Uncle James left it to us. And tomorrow, we're going to figure out what to do next. They made a nest in the back of the Humvee, using moving blankets Rachel found in one of the storage boxes. Tyler fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day. Rachel lay awake, staring at the corrugated metal ceiling far above, listening to the desert wind whistle through gaps in the walls. Her phone showed 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, it would be Sunday. In 36 hours, she had to face Daniel and his lawyer and somehow navigate a divorce settlement that had just become infinitely more complicated. She thought about her uncle, alone in this hangar for 47 years, maintaining vehicles nobody drove and protecting treasure nobody knew existed. What kind of man did that? What kind of loyalty or honor or sheer stubbornness kept someone faithful to a promise for that long? Rachel climbed out of the Humvee carefully, not wanting to wake Tyler. She walked to the vault, still open, and stood at its edge. Her flashlight beam played across the gold bars, each one representing more money than she'd made in her entire life. Her phone rang, vibrating in her hand. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then changed her mind. "Hello? Rachel Morrison?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "This is Margaret Chen. I've been monitoring James Hartwell's property for unusual activity. Your cell signal just appeared on my security network. Is everything all right?" Rachel didn't know how to answer that question. Was everything all right? She'd been evicted, was being divorced, might lose custody of her son, and had just inherited a fortune in gold that probably dozens of people would kill to possess. "I found the vault," Rachel said simply. A long pause. "I see. And you've read James's letter?" "Yes." "Then you know what you have, and you know it's legal. But you also know that legal and safe are two different things. What do I do?" Another pause. Rachel could hear typing in the background. "First, you don't tell anyone. Not yet. Second, you secure that site. James's security system is still active. Did you notice the cameras?" Rachel looked up. Sure enough, small cameras were mounted in the corners of the hangar, barely visible. She hadn't noticed them before. "I'm watching you right now," Margaret said, not unkindly. "You and your son, Tyler, right?" Rachel's grip tightened on the phone. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm protecting you. James trusted me. I hope you will too. Close the vault. Lock the hangar. Drive to the address. I'm going to text you. It's a secure storage facility, about 40 minutes from your location. Bring the red folder, the blue notebook, and one gold bar for authentication. Leave everything else exactly where it is. Why should I trust you? Because James did. Because I've spent 20 years helping him prepare for this moment. And because right now, Rachel, you're broadcasting your location to anyone who's monitoring cell signals in this area. Some of them work for me, some of them don't." The line went dead. Rachel stood frozen, her mind racing. She looked at the vault, at the fortune sitting in the darkness below. Then she looked at Tyler, sleeping peacefully in the Humvee. She made her decision. It took 30 minutes to close everything up. The vault door sealed. The hydraulic platform lowered back into place. The workbench returned to its position. Rachel grabbed the folders and notebook, and after a moment's hesitation, pulled one gold bar from the vault before sealing it again. The bar went into her backpack, impossibly heavy. The documents went into her purse. She locked the hangar with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, carried Tyler to the Honda he barely woke, and drove into the night following Margaret Chen's GPS coordinates. The address led to an industrial park in Palm Springs. One of the warehouse units had its lights on, the door open, just enough for a car to pull inside. Rachel hesitated, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. But what choice did she have? She pulled in. The door closed behind her automatically. A woman emerged from the shadows, Asian, maybe 50, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked expensive. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, but not unkind. "Rachel Morrison, you look like your father." "You knew my father. James showed me pictures. You have his eyes." Margaret glanced at the Honda. "Your son? He's sleeping. Good. Let's keep it that way." Margaret gestured to a small office space at the back of the warehouse. "Bring the documents and the gold." For the next 2 hours, while Tyler slept in the car, Rachel and Margaret Chen went through everything. Margaret authenticated the gold bar with equipment that looked more at home in a science lab than a warehouse. She reviewed the documents with the careful attention of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. Finally, she sat back. "It's all real, all legitimate." James was meticulous. She looked at Rachel. "Do you understand what this means? That I'm rich? That you're vulnerable? $278 million doesn't just change your life, Rachel. It makes you a target. For criminals, for opportunists, for government agencies that might want to contest the salvage laws." She paused. "For your ex-husband." Rachel's stomach clenched. "Daniel can't know about this. He will. If you try to keep it quiet during the divorce, you're committing fraud. If you disclose it, he'll fight for half." Margaret tapped the documents. "This is why James waited so long. This is why he chose you. He knew you'd need someone who could help you navigate this. And that's you. That's me. If you want my help." Rachel looked at this stranger, who knew more about her uncle than she did, who had equipment to authenticate gold and security systems monitoring desert hangars. Everything about this situation screamed danger. Trust no one. But Rachel thought about her uncle's letter. Trustworthy. Used her for years. And she thought about Tyler, sleeping in the car, depending on her to make the right choice. "What do I do?" Margaret smiled. "First, you secure everything. Second, we establish a legal entity, a trust that owns the assets, with you as the beneficiary, but not the direct owner. Third, we liquidate slowly, carefully, through channels that won't trigger red flags. And fourth, you prepare for battle. Battle. Your ex-husband. The divorce. Rachel, you need to understand something. The timing of this inheritance is both perfect and terrible. Perfect because you have resources to fight back. Terrible because Daniel will see those resources as his." Rachel's hands clenched. "He left us. He cheated. He took everything. Legally, he has rights, especially in California, especially if you acquired these assets during the marriage. I inherited them after he filed for divorce." Margaret's smile widened. "That's what we call good timing. But we still need to be smart." They talked until 3 a.m. By the time Rachel carried Tyler back to the car, Margaret had helped her transfer everything to a rental SUV. Something with tinted windows and more security. She had a plan. Monday's meeting would happen. But Rachel Morrison wasn't walking in empty-handed anymore. The law office of Bennett and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a glass and steel building in San Bernardino. Rachel had been here before, 3 months ago, when Daniel's lawyer had first laid out the divorce terms. She'd sat in a chair that felt designed to make her feel small, while Mark Bennett explained that Daniel was entitled to half of everything, including the apartment she'd paid for and the car she'd bought before they were married. She'd left that meeting in tears, knowing she couldn't afford to fight. This time, she arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a suit Margaret had helped her buy that morning. Nothing flashy, but professional, confident. She carried a leather briefcase that Margaret had loaned her, filled with documents that would change everything. Tyler was with Sarah, who'd asked 17 questions Rachel had deflected, with 17 variations of, "I'll explain later." The receptionist did a double take when Rachel walked in. "Mrs. Morrison?" "Miss Hartwell," Rachel corrected. She was taking back her maiden name. That had been decision number 1. "I'm here for the 2 o'clock meeting." "Of course. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine. Thank you." She settled into one of the waiting area chairs and pulled out her phone. A text from Margaret. "Remember, say nothing until they put their offer on the table. Then we counteroffer." Another text, this one from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Andrew Castellano. Margaret Chen referred you. I'm the attorney who'll be handling your case. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Don't sign anything." Rachel's heart rate kicked up. This was really happening. Daniel arrived at 1:58, his lawyer Mark Bennett beside him. Daniel looked good. He always looked good. He'd lost weight, was wearing a suit she'd never seen, probably bought with money that should have gone to Tyler's school supplies. His eyes skipped over her, then came back, confused. "Rachel?" She looked at him. This man she'd married at 23, who'd promised to be her partner, who'd left her scrambling to make rent while he moved into his girlfriend's condo. She felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, just a cold, clear certainty that he'd made his choice, and now she was making hers. "Daniel, you're early." "I'm on time." Mark Bennett cleared his throat. "Shall we go in?" "We're waiting for my attorney," Rachel said. Daniel blinked. "Your attorney?" "Rachel, you can't afford—" "Things have changed." The elevator dinged. A man stepped out, late 40s, expensive suit, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Rachel's car used to be worth. He moved like someone who'd won cases in courtrooms that mattered. "Miss Hartwell?" He extended his hand. "Andrew Castellano. Shall we?" The conference room had a view of the mountains, filtered through tinted glass that turned the sky gray. Rachel sat at the table, Castellano beside her. Daniel and Bennett sat across from them, Daniel's confusion hardening into something uglier. "What's going on, Rachel?" "We're having a divorce settlement meeting," she said calmly. "That's what's going on." Bennett opened his folder. "Let's start with the basics. Mrs. Morrison." "Miss Hartwell," Castellano interrupted smoothly. "My client is resuming her maiden name." "Of course." Bennett didn't miss a beat. "The proposed settlement is straightforward. The apartment is in your name, Rachel, but the down payment came from joint savings. We're proposing Mr. Morrison receives 50% equity. The car is titled solely in my client's name, purchased before the marriage with her personal funds," Castellano said. "Not a marital asset," Bennett frowned. "The furniture, the joint bank account, has a balance of $247, Castellano said. "My client is happy to split it, $123.50 each." Daniel leaned forward. "What about the credit cards? I've got $18,000 in debt from From expenses incurred after you moved out, Castellano said, including several charges at jewelry stores and restaurants my client never visited. Not marital debt. Rachel watched Daniel's face darken. This wasn't going the way he'd expected. Bennett cleared his throat. And the custody arrangement? My client is seeking primary physical custody of Tyler, with reasonable visitation for Mr. Morrison. That's not, Daniel started, but Bennett put a hand on his arm. Mr. Morrison had indicated he wants joint custody. Mr. Morrison left the marital home 3 months ago, Castellano said. He's seen his son 4 times since then, including twice when my client had to cancel work to accommodate his schedule. His commitment to co-parenting is, at best, inconsistent. That's not fair, Daniel said. I've been dealing with a lot. Like, moving in with your girlfriend. Rachel's voice was quiet but steady. Like the trip to Vegas last month? I saw the photos on her Instagram. Daniel, you looked like you were dealing with a lot. His face flushed. Rachel, is there anything else? Castellano asked Bennett, cutting off whatever Daniel was about to say. Bennett looked uncomfortable. We need full financial disclosure from both parties. Rachel, you'll need to provide. We have full disclosure, Castellano said. He pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. My client's current assets, income, and debts, all documented. Bennett opened the folder. His eyebrows rose. He looked at Rachel, then back at the papers. This says, is this correct? You inherited property valued at… Read it, Castellano said. Rachel watched Daniel's lawyer scan the page. Watched his expression change. Confusion, surprise, something that might have been respect. Rachel, Bennett said carefully, this document indicates you've inherited property worth several $100,000. Is that accurate? It's accurate. Daniel grabbed the folder, read the page. His face went pale. What the hell is this? My uncle passed away. He left me property. What kind of property? A military hangar and land in Twentynine Palms, Rachel said. Free and clear. No mortgage. How much is it worth? Castellano smiled. The property has been appraised at $675,000. There are also several military vehicles on site, fully maintained, valued at approximately $125,000, $800,000. Margaret had been clear. Disclose enough to satisfy legal requirements, but not so much that it triggered questions. The real estate and vehicles were legitimate, documented, and easy to verify. The vault's contents were not mentioned. Daniel's hands were shaking. $800,000, which my client inherited after you filed for divorce, Castellano said. Not a marital asset. Separate property under California law. That's… Daniel looked at Bennett. That's not fair. We're still married. You filed for divorce 3 months ago, Castellano said. You moved out. You established a separate residence with another woman. You can't claim marital rights to assets acquired during separation. Bennett was reading the documents carefully. Finally, he looked at Rachel. Miss Hartwell, this is unusually well documented. My uncle was thorough. And you're certain about the valuation? I have 3 independent appraisals. They're all in the folder. Bennett exchanged a look with Daniel, who was staring at Rachel like he'd never seen her before. This changes things, Bennett said carefully. If the property is worth what you say, Rachel, then you have significant assets, which means my client can afford a protracted custody. Battle if necessary, Castellano said. She can afford expert witnesses, psychological evaluations, and a comprehensive demonstration of Mr. Morrison's limited involvement in his son's life. Or we can settle this reasonably, quickly, and in the best interests of the child. Rachel watched Daniel struggle with the math. He'd come here expecting to squeeze money out of her. Instead, he was facing a woman with resources, with a lawyer who knew what he was doing, and with documentation that proved every point. "What are you proposing?" Bennett asked. Castellano slid another document across the table. "Miss Hartwell keeps all separate property, including the inherited assets. Mr. Morrison keeps his personal possessions and his vehicle. They split the joint bank account. Miss Hartwell receives primary physical custody of Tyler, with Mr. Morrison receiving visitation every other weekend and 1 evening per week, with 30 days' notice required for any changes, and child support." Daniel's voice was tight. "Miss Hartwell is waiving child support." That got everyone's attention. Daniel looked suspicious. Bennett looked surprised. Even Castellano glanced at Rachel, but she'd been clear about this with him. "I don't want his money," Rachel said. "I want him to be Tyler's father, but on my terms." "What terms?" Daniel asked. "You show up when you say you will. You don't cancel for your girlfriend. You don't introduce Tyler to her until we've been divorced for at least 6 months. You contribute to his school expenses and medical costs. And you don't," her voice hardened, "ever call me unstable again." Daniel had the grace to look ashamed. "Rachel, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. But here's the thing, Daniel. I'm not unstable. I'm not broke. I'm not desperate. So you can sign this agreement, and we can move forward, or we can fight. And I promise you, I have better lawyers now." Silence filled the conference room. Rachel could hear her own heartbeat, could feel Castellano's approving presence beside her. Finally, Bennett spoke. "We'll need time to review." "You have 1 hour," Castellano said. "After that, the offer changes. My client is prepared to file for sole custody based on abandonment and emotional abuse. We have witnesses. We have documentation of Mr. Morrison's infidelity and financial irresponsibility." 1 hour. They left the conference room. Rachel's legs were shaking, but she didn't let it show until they were in the elevator. Then she braced herself against the wall, breathing hard. "You did well," Castellano said. "Is it over?" "They'll sign. Bennett knows they have no leverage." He looked at her. "Margaret was right about you. You're stronger than you look." Rachel thought about Tyler, about the vault full of gold, about the uncle she'd barely known who'd somehow seen something in her worth saving. "I'm strong enough," she said. "I have to be." They signed 43 minutes later. Daniel's signature was angry. The pen, pressing so hard it nearly tore through the paper. Rachel signed calmly, her hand steady, and when it was done, she stood and walked out without looking back. Castellano walked her to the parking garage. "The trust documents are ready. We can move forward with Margaret's plan whenever you're ready." "How long will it take?" "To liquidate everything." "Years. But you'll have access to funds within weeks. Enough to stabilize your life. Make decisions." He paused. "Your uncle planned this very carefully, Miss Hartwell. He wanted to make sure you weren't just surviving. He wanted to make sure you could thrive." Rachel drove to Sarah's house to pick up Tyler. Her son ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Did you win, Mom?" She thought about what winning meant. Daniel was out of their lives. Tyler was safe. She had resources now, not just money, but options, possibilities, a future that didn't involve choosing between groceries and electricity. Yeah, baby, I think I did. That night, they drove back to the hangar. Margaret's security team had installed proper lighting, a better lock, and a surveillance system that would alert Rachel if anyone came within a mile of the property. The generator was running, and when Rachel flipped the lights, the whole hangar blazed to life. "Can we stay here?" Tyler asked, looking around with wonder. Rachel thought about their apartment, their things probably sitting on a curb somewhere, already scavenged by neighbors. She thought about the vault beneath their feet, about the fortune that would take years to fully realize, but that already meant freedom. "Not yet," she said, "but someday. Right now, we're going to find a real place, a home." She'd already been looking, with Margaret's help. A house in a good school district, nothing flashy but solid. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a garage where Tyler could learn to ride his bike without worrying about traffic. It would cost $400,000, which 3 months ago would have been impossible. Now it was Monday's problem to solve. "Mom?" Tyler was looking at the photograph of her father and uncle. Was Uncle James a good man? Rachel joined him, studying the image of 2 brothers who'd shared something most people would never understand. War, secrets, a burden that one had carried alone for nearly 50 years so that his family might someday benefit. "Yeah," she said softly, "he was a very good man. He just didn't know how to show it while he was alive." Over the next 6 months, Rachel Morrison, now legally Rachel Hartwell again, learned what it meant to be wealthy quietly. Margaret's network liquidated the gold and silver slowly, a few bars at a time, through channels that didn't trigger government attention. The bearer bonds were more complicated, requiring legal maneuvers Rachel didn't fully understand, but trusted Margaret and Castellano to navigate. The jewelry went to discreet auction houses where Margaret had relationships. Each piece was authenticated, appraised, and sold to collectors who asked no questions about provenance. The cash was easiest deposited in small amounts across multiple accounts, always staying under reporting thresholds. Within 3 months, Rachel had $12 million liquid and accessible. Within 6 months, $40 million. The rest would come over time, but she already had more money than she could spend in 3 lifetimes. She bought the house, 3 bedrooms, not 4. A yard big enough for a dog, which Tyler named Colonel after his great-uncle. She furnished it modestly comfortable, not ostentatious. The only extravagance was Tyler's bedroom, which he designed himself. Walls painted like a sky, glow in the dark stars on the ceiling, and a bookshelf already overflowing with books about pilots and planes and his great-grandfather who'd served in Vietnam. She hired a financial advisor who specialized in sudden wealth people who'd won the lottery or received large settlements. Someone who understood that having money didn't mean you knew what to do with it. She paid off every debt: medical bills, credit cards, the student loans from the nursing degree she'd never finished. It took one morning and felt like removing chains. She set up a trust for Tyler. College, yes, but also safety. If something happened to her, he'd be protected. And slowly, carefully, Rachel began to think about what she wanted to do next. She didn't quit her job immediately. Margaret had warned against sudden changes that would raise questions, But she did cut back her hours, spent more time with Tyler, began to breathe without the constant weight of financial terror. Daniel saw Tyler every other weekend. As agreed, the first few visits were awkward, but he showed up on time, and Tyler always came home happy. Rachel learned to be civil, even friendly. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only a kind of sad understanding that they'd both been too young and too scared to make their marriage work. At night, after Tyler was asleep, Rachel would drive to the hangar. She'd kept it, despite Margaret's suggestion to sell. Something about the space felt sacred, a bridge between her uncle's sacrifice and her new reality. She'd renovated it, slowly. Better lighting, insulation, a real office space with internet and running water. The vehicles stayed. She'd learned to drive the Jeep, and Tyler loved riding in the Humvee. The vault was empty now, but she kept it open, a reminder of where they'd come from. One evening, Margaret joined her there. They sat in lawn chairs outside, watching the sunset paint the desert gold and crimson, sharing a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Rachel used to make in a week. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" Margaret asked. Rachel had been thinking about that question for months. What did you do when you didn't have to do anything? When survival wasn't the goal anymore? What came next? "I want to help people," Rachel said. "People like me, single mothers, people getting divorced who can't afford lawyers, people who are one medical bill away from losing everything." Margaret smiled. "That's good. How?" "I don't know yet. A foundation, maybe. Something that provides legal support, financial counseling, emergency funds." She paused. "My uncle protected this money for 47 years because he thought the government had failed the people it was supposed to serve. Maybe I can succeed where they failed. That's ambitious. I have the money for ambitious." Margaret laughed. "You do. And you know what? James would love this. He always said the system was broken, that the government hoarded resources while people suffered. Using his money to fix that? It's perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky fade from gold to purple to black. Stars emerged, more stars than Rachel had ever seen in the city, a blanket of light that made the desert feel less empty. "Margaret," Rachel said softly, "why did you help him?" "My uncle. Why? Spend 20 years managing this for someone you barely knew?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Because he was honorable, and because honor is rare enough that when you find it, you protect it." She looked at Rachel. "Your uncle could have taken that money and disappeared, could have lived like a king anywhere in the world. Instead, he stayed in a desert hangar for 47 years, maintaining equipment nobody used, protecting assets nobody knew existed, waiting for the right person to inherit his burden. Why me? Because you looked at him like he was human. That's what he said. At your grandmother's funeral, everyone else saw a crazy man. You saw your uncle. That mattered to him." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back, watching the stars. "I wish I'd known him better." "You know him now. Every choice you make with that money, you're getting to know him better." The foundation launched quietly, a year after Rachel inherited the hangar. She called it the Hartwell Family Foundation, named for her uncle and father both. Its mission: providing legal aid, financial counseling, and emergency assistance to families in crisis. The first grants went to domestic violence shelters, legal representation for women trying to escape abusive marriages. Then single parents facing eviction, people buried in medical debt, veterans struggling with PTSD who couldn't afford treatment. Rachel worked with social workers, lawyers, and financial advisors to create a system that actually helped people, not just made them fill out forms. Small amounts of money, strategically applied at the right moment, could change entire trajectories. A woman facing eviction needed $2,000 to catch up on rent. The foundation paid it, then connected her with a job training program. 6 months later, she was a certified medical assistant, making $22 an hour. A man's car broke down, and he couldn't get to work. The foundation repaired it for $1,100. He kept his job, got promoted, eventually bought a house. A single mother needed a lawyer to fight for custody. The foundation paid for representation. She won. Her daughter stayed safe. Story after story, life after life. The money that had sat in a vault for 47 years, finally doing what it was meant to do: saving people. Rachel kept her identity hidden. The foundation's board knew her as R. Hartwell, and she attended meetings remotely. She didn't want gratitude or recognition. She wanted results, but word spread anyway. Have you heard about the Hartwell Foundation? They actually help, like, really help. My cousin got legal aid through them, changed her life. 3 years after inheriting the hangar, Rachel was sitting in her home office, reviewing grant applications, when Tyler appeared in the doorway. He was 10 now, taller, his face losing the softness of childhood. "Mom, there's someone here to see you." Rachel looked up. "Who?" She says. Her name is Patricia Morse. She's from the government? Rachel's heart skipped. She'd been waiting for this, honestly. You couldn't move $278 million through the financial system without eventually attracting attention, no matter how careful you were. She found the woman in her living room, late 50s, silver hair, dressed in a suit that screamed federal agent. But her expression wasn't hostile. If anything, she looked curious. "Miss Hartwell, thank you for seeing me. Do I have a choice?" Morse smiled. "Always. I'm here unofficially." Rachel sat down slowly. "Unofficially? I work for Treasury. My job is tracking recovered assets, things that were lost, stolen, or misplaced by the federal government over the years." She paused. 3 years ago, we flagged some unusual gold transactions. Small amounts, but the gold matched serial numbers from a batch that went missing in 1975. Rachel's mouth went dry. "I see. We traced it back to your foundation, which led us to you, which led us to a hangar in Twentynine Palms registered to James Hartwell, deceased." Morse pulled out a folder. "Colonel Hartwell was part of Operation Harvest Moon. We have records of him being assigned to asset recovery in Saigon, April 1975. And we have records of those assets being written off as transport losses. So the gold is legally mine. That's the interesting part." Morse opened the folder, showed Rachel a document. The write-off memo from 1975 explicitly states that remaining field inventory is considered salvaged by personnel involved in recovery operations. Your uncle was personnel. The inventory was salvaged. Legally, it was his. And now, it's yours. Rachel couldn't breathe. "Then why are you here?" "Because I wanted to know what you'd do with it. We've been watching the foundation, the grants you make, the people you help." Morse's expression softened. "Your uncle kept that money safe for 47 years because he didn't trust the government to use it wisely. Looks like he was right to wait for you. You're not taking it back." Can't. Legally, it's yours. More importantly. Morse hesitated, then smiled. I don't want to. The work you're doing? It's what that money should have been used for all along. If the government had it, it'd be buried in some budget line for defense contractors. You're changing lives. She stood, extended her hand. Rachel shook it, still stunned. One more thing, Morse said at the door. There are others, other operations like Harvest Moon, other assets that were written off and forgotten. If you ever come across them, if people reach out to you. She pulled out a card. Call me. Let's make sure they end up doing some good. After she left, Rachel sat in her living room for a long time, holding the card, thinking about salvage and treasure and the strange ways that honor passed through generations. Tyler sat beside her. Mom, are we in trouble? She pulled him close. No, baby. I think we just got permission to keep helping people. 5 years after inheriting the hangar, Rachel stood in front of an audience of 200 people at a conference center in San Diego. The Hartwell Foundation's annual symposium. Lawyers, social workers, financial advisors, and families they'd helped, all gathered to share stories and strategies. She'd finally agreed to speak publicly, to put a face to the foundation. No more hiding behind R. Hartwell. It was time to own who she was and what she'd built. My name is Rachel Hartwell Morrison, she began, her voice steady, despite the nerves. 5 years ago, I was a single mother, about to be evicted from my apartment. I was working double shifts at a diner, driving a car held together with hope and duct tape, and I was terrified every single day that I wouldn't be able to provide for my son. She paused, looking out at the audience. She saw faces that mirrored her old fear, people who understood exactly what that terror felt like. Then I inherited property from an uncle I barely knew, and on that property, I found something that changed my life. Not just money, though there was money. I found proof that one person, acting with honor and patience and faith, can protect something valuable until the right moment comes to use it. She told them about James Hartwell, not about the gold, but about the man. A soldier who'd kept promises nobody remembered, who'd lived alone in the desert, maintaining equipment for decades, waiting for someone who would understand what he'd preserved. He taught me that wealth isn't just about money. It's about responsibility. It's about using resources to build something that lasts. She gestured to the crowd. This foundation exists because my uncle believed that broken systems could be fixed by determined people. And you're all proving him right. The applause was thunderous. Rachel saw people crying, saw recognition and hope on faces that had known too much despair. After the speech, dozens of people approached her. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others wanted to share their stories, how the foundation had saved them, how a small grant at the right moment had changed everything. One woman, maybe 30, with 2 children clinging to her legs, grabbed Rachel's hands. You saved us. We were living in our car. The foundation paid for first and last month's rent, helped me get my security license. I start a new job Monday. Rachel squeezed her hands. You saved yourself. We just gave you the space to do it. But she knew the truth. Sometimes, people needed someone to believe in them before they could believe in themselves. Her uncle had believed in her. Now she was paying that forward. That night, after everyone had gone home, Rachel drove to the hangar. It had become her refuge, the place she went when she needed to think. Tyler was with her 12 years old now, already taller than she was, his voice deepening. He'd started researching his family history. asking questions about his great-uncle and grandfather, about the war and the secrets and the strange path that had led them to this moment. They sat on the hood of the jeep, watching the stars emerge. The desert was quiet, peaceful, infinite. "Mom," Tyler said, "why do you think Uncle James waited so long? He could have used the money himself." Rachel had asked herself that question 1,000 times. "I think he was scared. He'd seen what greed did to people, what corruption looked like, how power twisted things. He didn't trust himself to use it right. Or maybe he did trust himself, but he didn't trust the world to let him. So, he waited for you. He waited for someone who understood what it felt like to have nothing. Someone who'd remember what desperation tasted like, even after the money came." Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you ever wish you could talk to him? Tell him what you did?" Rachel's throat tightened. "Every day. I think he knows. I think that's why he chose you. He knew you'd do this." They sat in silence, mother and son, inheritors of a fortune built on secrets and faith, watching the stars wheel overhead. The vault beneath them was empty now, but the hangar wasn't. Rachel had filled it with purpose offices for the foundation, meeting spaces where families came to get help, a small museum documenting Operation Harvest Moon and the sacrifices of people like her uncle and father. The vehicles were still there, maintained and cherished. Tyler had learned to drive the jeep, practicing in the desert, his great-uncle's spirit somehow present in the rumble of the engine. And on the wall, in a place of honor, hung the photograph of James and David Hartwell, two brothers in Vietnam, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling at a future they couldn't have imagined. Rachel looked at that photograph now, at her father's young face and her uncle's unguarded smile, and she understood finally what they'd been protecting. Not gold, not wealth, hope that someday someone would use what they'd saved to build something better. Hope that sacrifice wasn't meaningless, that faith could outlast fear, that broken things could be mended by people brave enough to try. "Thank you," Rachel whispered to the photograph. To the men she'd lost too soon. To the uncle who'd trusted her with his life's work. "Thank you for believing I could do this." The stars offered no answer, but she didn't need one. The work was the answer. The lives changed, the families saved, the hope restored. That was the response to her uncle's faith. And as she sat in the hangar he'd maintained for 47 years, surrounded by evidence of what patience and honor could build, Rachel Morrison, Rachel Hartwell, knew that some treasures were worth waiting for, and some inheritances weren't measured in gold at all. 10 years after the envelope arrived, Rachel Hartwell Morrison stood at the dedication ceremony for the Hartwell Center for Family Justice, a $40 million facility that would provide legal aid, counseling, and emergency housing for families in crisis across California. Tyler, 17 now, and headed to MIT on a scholarship he'd earned himself, stood beside her. Daniel was there too, in the back, and Rachel had invited him. They weren't friends, but they weren't enemies either. He'd become a decent father, and that was enough. Margaret Chen stood with her, and Andrew Castellano, and Patricia Morse, who'd become an unexpected ally in finding other lost government assets and ensuring they went to people who'd use them wisely. The governor was speaking, thanking the anonymous donor who'd made this possible. Rachel had insisted on anonymity. Let the work speak for itself. But after the ceremony, after the photographs and handshakes and official recognition, Rachel slipped away to her car. Tyler caught up with her in the parking lot. "You should have let them use your name," he said. Rachel smiled. "Your great-uncle spent 47 years as a ghost, Tyler. Anonymous is a Hartwell family tradition." They drove back to the hangar. It was still hers, still a refuge. On the way, Tyler was quiet. Then, "I've decided my major. Engineering, like Uncle James, but also non-profit management. I want to learn how to build things and how to help people." Rachel's vision blurred with tears. "He'd be so proud of you." "He'd be proud of you too, Mom. You took something that could have destroyed you, all that money, all that pressure, and you turned it into something that saves people. That's legacy." That night, Rachel stood alone in the hangar. The vault was still open, still empty, but she'd put something in it recently, a time capsule of sorts. Letters from people the foundation had helped. Photographs of families saved from eviction. Children who'd stayed with their protective parents. Veterans who'd found healing. And her own letter, written to whoever might find this place someday, explaining what her uncle had done and what she'd tried to do with his gift. The last paragraph read, "Treasure isn't gold. It's time given to people who need it. Time bought by resources used wisely. Time that allows desperate people to become stable people who become thriving people. My uncle gave me time. I've spent 10 years giving it to others. If you're reading this, I hope you'll do the same. The world needs more time givers." She sealed the vault, not forever, just until someone needed it opened again. As she locked the hangar and drove home under a sky full of stars, Rachel thought about inheritance and treasure and the strange paths that led desperate people to discover they'd always been rich in the things that mattered most. Courage, purpose, the ability to look at broken things and imagine them whole. Her uncle had left her $278 million in gold, but the real inheritance was the belief that one person, acting with honor and patience, could change the world. And Rachel Morrison, Rachel Hartwell, had spent 10 years proving him right. 20 years after the vault opened, Rachel received a phone call that brought everything full circle. "Miss Hartwell? This is Captain David Chen, U.S. Army Records Division. We've been going through recently declassified documents from Operation Harvest Moon, and we found something you should see." Rachel, now 52 with silver threading through her hair, set down her coffee. Tyler had graduated from MIT, started his own non-profit, married a wonderful woman named Lisa. The foundation had expanded to 6 states. She'd thought the story was finished. What kind of something? A letter from Colonel Hartwell, written in 1989 but sealed for 30 years per military protocol. It's addressed to his niece, Rachel. We're required to deliver it in person. Captain Chen arrived at her home 3 days later, carrying a weathered envelope in a protective sleeve. Rachel's hands trembled as she opened it, Uncle James's familiar handwriting swimming before her eyes. "Rachel, if you're reading this, then you found what I left you, and hopefully you did something worthwhile with it. I'm writing this 14 years before I'll die, but I already know you'll be the one. Your father told me stories about you, how you stood up to bullies in 3rd grade, how you worked 2 jobs to help pay for your mother's cancer treatments, how you never complained, never gave up. That's why I chose you. Not because you were family, but because you were strong in the way that matters, strong enough to be broken and still get back up. I need to tell you something I never could while alive. That gold wasn't abandoned by accident. In 1975, there were men in the government who saw the war ending and saw an opportunity. They planned to lose assets, collect insurance, and split the money. I was ordered to transport the gold to a location where it could be quietly stolen. Instead, I hid it. For 47 years, I waited for them to come looking. They never did. The men who planned the theft died or retired, and the secret died with them. Except for me. I lived with that burden alone because I didn't know who to trust. But in choosing isolation, I lost everything that made life worth living: family, connection, purpose. Don't make my mistake, Rachel. The gold was meant to give you freedom, not imprison you. Use it, share it, let it connect you to people, not separate you from them. Your father understood. Before he died, he told me, "James, when this is over, make sure Rachel knows she's loved. Make sure she knows that what we did hiding that gold, protecting it, we did it for her generation, for the chance that someone good would find it and fix what we couldn't." I hope I chose right. I believe I did. With love from your paranoid, isolated, but always faithful uncle, James Hartwell. Rachel wept. After 20 years of wondering if she'd honored his legacy, here was confirmation that she'd done exactly what he'd hoped. That evening, she gathered Tyler and his family, showed them the letter. Her grandson, James, named for his great-great-uncle, was 2 years old, playing with blocks on the floor. "He kept faith with us," Tyler said quietly, "even when it cost him everything." Rachel watched her grandson build towers and knock them down, building them again, the simple joy of creation. She thought about inheritance and sacrifice and the long chain of choices that led from a vault in the desert to this moment. "And we'll keep faith with him," Rachel said. "We'll keep building." Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.